Nobody tells you that the brightest minds carry the loneliest hearts. They don't warn you about that. Not until it's already happened. I'm 87 years old. My name is Evelyn. And 3 weeks ago, I stood in an empty apartment that used to belong to the smartest woman I ever knew, and I finally understood why she died with no one holding her hand. Her name was Margaret, 84. We'd known each other for 32 years. She spoke 4 languages, had been a research chemist, could explain quantum physics over coffee like it was a recipe for pound cake. The funeral had 11 people. 11. Her son flew in from Seattle, stayed 48 hours, flew back. He barely looked at her things. Everyone said what a shame it was. She was so brilliant. They whispered at the service. Such a mind. But I heard what they didn't say. I heard the relief in their voices. Like they'd been holding their breath around her for decades and finally could exhale. But here's what they didn't know. What nobody tells you about intelligence and loneliness. Margaret wasn't alone because she was difficult. She wasn't alone because she was cold. She was alone because she couldn't stop seeing things other people desperately needed not to see. And once you understand that difference, once you see what I saw in that empty apartment, you'll never look at the quiet, brilliant people in your life the same way again. If you've ever felt like the smartest person in the room and the loneliest at the same time, you need to hear this before it's too late. Before you make the same choices she did. The ones I almost made. My husband Harold died 6 years ago. He was a good man, simple tastes, simple pleasures. He liked baseball and barbecue, and he never read a book that didn't have a picture on every other page. I loved him. I did. But I spent 43 years of our marriage biting my tongue so hard I'm surprised it's still attached. When he died, everyone expected me to fall apart. My daughter Linda called every single day for 2 months. Mom, are you eating? Mom, you need to get out of the house. Mom, there's a widows group at the church. I went once, sat in a circle of folding chairs in the church basement on a Tuesday night. There were 7 of us. The woman running it, Diane, maybe 55, kept talking about our grief journey and finding closure. She had us go around and share our favorite memory of our husbands. When it was my turn, I froze, because the first thing that came to mind wasn't a favorite memory. It was a feeling. Relief. Not that he was dead, God no. But relief that I could finally think my own thoughts out loud in my own house without someone looking at me like I'd just spoken Martian. I said something bland about a vacation we took in 1982. Everyone nodded. Someone patted my hand. I never went back. That's when I started spending more time with Margaret. We'd known each other for years, but always at a distance. Polite. She lived 4 doors down in my building. I'd see her in the lobby with her canvas bags full of library books, always alone, always nodding hello but never stopping to chat. 2 months after Harold died, I ran into her at the mailboxes. She was reading a letter and I saw her hands shake. Just a tremor, but I noticed. Are you all right? I asked. She looked at me, really looked at me. Her eyes were pale grey, like winter sky. My son is getting remarried, she said. He wants to know if I'll contribute to the wedding fund. Oh, I said. That's nice. He hasn't visited me in 3 years, Evelyn. She folded the letter very precisely, creasing each edge. But he'd like a check for $5,000. I didn't know what to say. The silence stretched out between us. Then she said, Would you like to come for tea? Real tea, not the bag nonsense. I have Earl Grey from a shop in London. I went. We sat in her apartment, which was full of books and plants and absolutely no photographs, and we talked for 4 hours. Actually talked. About things that mattered. She asked me what I thought about the election, about automation, about whether consciousness could be replicated in machines. Nobody had asked me what I thought about anything in years. When I left that evening, my chest felt lighter than it had in months, maybe years. But I also noted something. In 4 hours, Margaret's phone never rang. Not once. That's when I started paying attention. That's when I learned the first thing nobody tells you about brilliant people and loneliness. The first reason they end up alone is simple, and it broke my heart when I finally saw it clearly. Smart people, really smart people, they can't pretend. They've tried. God knows they've tried, but they can't sustain it. I saw this with my neighbor Thomas, 72, retired mathematics professor. Brilliant man. Could calculate compound interest in his head faster than I could type it into a calculator. His wife left him after 30 years of marriage. I was getting my mail one morning when I heard them arguing in the hallway. This was maybe 8 years ago, before she finally left. "I just want you to stop," she was saying. Her voice was shaking. "Just for one dinner party, Thomas. Just smile and nod." "I did smile and nod," he said. He sounded genuinely confused. "I smiled at Carol when she talked about her cruise. You told her cruise ships were floating environmental disasters and then explained the carbon footprint per passenger. She asked what I thought about cruises." "No, Thomas." She didn't. She was making conversation. She wanted you to say, "That sounds lovely," and move on. There was a long pause. When Thomas spoke again, his voice was very quiet. "I don't know how to do that, Janet. I don't know how to hear something I know is wrong and just let it sit there." She left 3 months later. I saw her loading boxes into her sister's car. Thomas stood in the doorway watching, his hands in his pockets. He didn't try to stop her. I understood then what I'd been doing my whole marriage. I'd been playing Janet's game, smiling and nodding, saying, "That sounds lovely," when Harold told me about his opinions on things he'd never researched, never questioned. I'd been performing normal for 43 years, and it had nearly killed the part of me that was actually me. Margaret told me once. The smartest people I've known all have the same exhausted look in their eyes, like they're translating every conversation from a language no one else speaks. That was it exactly, translation. Constant, exhausting translation. And here's what scared me. I realized I had that look too. I'd seen it in the mirror and thought I just looked old. But it wasn't age, it was tired. That was the first reason. And it shook me. But it wasn't enough to explain Margaret's empty funeral. Not yet. The second reason came from somewhere I didn't expect. Smart people ask questions, not to be difficult, not to show off. They ask because they genuinely can't move forward without understanding. And people hate them for it. I learned this from watching Margaret in our building's residents' association meetings. We had them quarterly. Usually boring, talk about landscaping budgets and parking space assignments. In 2019, the building manager proposed replacing all our windows. Government energy efficiency grant would cover 60% of the cost, he said. Each unit would need to pay $1,800. Everyone was nodding along. Margaret raised her hand. "Which company is doing the installation?" she asked. "Green Tech Solutions," the manager said. "Very reputable." "And did we get competing bids?" His smile got tighter. "We did our research, Margaret." "How many bids?" "We're confident in our choice." "That's not an answer to my question." The room got very quiet. I could feel people shifting in their seats, uncomfortable. The woman next to me, Susan from 4B, whispered, "Why does she always have to make everything so complicated?" Margaret kept going. "Did anyone verify the grant terms? Because some of these energy programs require certified installers, and if Green Tech isn't certified, we'd have to pay the full amount back." The manager's face went red. "Are you suggesting we haven't done our due diligence?" "I'm asking questions that should have simple answers. If they're simple." They weren't simple. Turned out Green Tech was owned by the manager's brother-in-law. The grant did require certified installers. They weren't certified. Margaret had saved everyone in that building thousands of dollars. At the next meeting, only half the people showed up. Margaret sat alone in her usual chair. No one sat next to her. No one said thank you. After the meeting, I walked out with her. "You did a good thing," I said. "You saved us money." She smiled, but it was sad. "I made them feel stupid, Evelyn. That's what they'll remember. Not the money, the feeling. You didn't make them feel anything. No." She stopped walking. "That's the trap. The trap smart people fall into. Thinking that being right matters more than how you make people feel. And you know what? Maybe it shouldn't matter. Maybe people should care about truth more than comfort. But they don't. They never have. And every time I ask a question, I'm choosing truth over belonging." Her hands were shaking again. That tremor I'd noticed before. "After a while," she said quietly, "you run out of people who'll tolerate that choice." I went home and I cried, because I knew exactly what she meant. Every time I'd asked, "Why?" instead of nodding. Every time I'd pointed out an inconsistency. Every time I'd suggested there might be another way to look at something. I'd watch people's faces close. Watched them step back. Watched the invitations stop coming. My son Robert stopped asking me to holiday dinners with his wife's family after I questioned their church's financial transparency. Just stopped inviting me. Started saying they were keeping it small this year. You can be right and be alone. The smartest people I know have proven that over and over. But there was more. And what came next was even worse. The third reason is the one nobody wants to say out loud. People are afraid of intelligence. Genuinely afraid. Not intimidated. Afraid. I didn't understand this until Margaret got sick. It was pancreatic cancer. Fast, brutal. She told me on a Wednesday afternoon in her apartment. She'd just come from the doctor. "Stage 4, she said, very calm. Too calm. He gave me 4 to 6 months. Maybe 8 with treatment. My chest tightened. "Oh, Margaret, I'm not doing treatment," she said. The statistics don't justify the suffering. I've read the studies. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, my age, treatment might buy me 6 weeks in exchange for months of agony. The math doesn't work. But I didn't know what to say. Maybe there isn't, Evelyn. She poured more tea. Her hands were steady now. I've researched it. Thoroughly. This is my decision. I told my daughter Linda. I shouldn't have, but I needed someone to talk to. Linda was horrified. She's giving up? Just like that? She's thought it through. She thinks she's smarter than her doctors. That's insane, Mom. That's literally insane. She's not saying she's smarter. She's saying she's read the same research they have and made a different choice about her own body. Linda got very quiet. Then, Mom, I don't think you should spend so much time with her. Something went cold in my stomach. What? She's clearly not stable. And you're vulnerable right now, after Dad. Linda, she has cancer? And she's making crazy decisions. That's a sign of diminished capacity. You said she has no family involved. Maybe someone needs to get power of attorney. Make sure I hung up on my own daughter. First time in my life. Because I heard it. The fear under her words. Margaret wasn't diminished. Margaret was doing exactly what she'd always done, thinking clearly, researching thoroughly, making informed decisions. But because those decisions didn't match what normal people would do, because she wasn't falling apart or grasping at false hope. Linda wanted her declared incompetent. People don't want you to be smarter than they are. They want you to be smart enough to fix their computer or explain their taxes. But not so smart that you make different choices. Not so smart that you see options they don't see. That terrifies them. Because if you can think your way to a different conclusion, what does that say about their conclusions? Margaret spent her last 3 months mostly alone. I visited twice a week. Her son came once, stayed an hour, spent most of it on his phone. A hospice nurse came daily toward the end. The day before she died, I sat with her. She was thin fading, but her mind was still sharp. I don't regret it, she said suddenly. Regret what? Being alone. Being this. She gestured vaguely at herself, at her book-filled apartment, at the life she'd lived. I used to think something was wrong with me, that I should try harder to be smaller, quieter, more palatable. Margaret. But I couldn't, Evelyn. I couldn't shrink myself enough, and the loneliness was the price. I see that now. She looked at me with those pale grey eyes. The question is whether the price was worth it. Was it? I whispered. She was quiet for a long time. Ask me that again when you've lived a few more years as yourself instead of as the woman everyone wants you to be. She died the next morning. Alone. The nurse found her. Here's what I learned, sitting in Margaret's apartment after the funeral, surrounded by her books and her plants and her carefully considered life. The smartest people are alone because the world doesn't have room for them. Not really. We say we value intelligence, but what we actually value is intelligence in service of our comfort. Smart enough to solve our problems, not so smart that you question our assumptions. Brilliant enough to admire, not so brilliant that we feel small in comparison. The truth was simpler and harder than I'd thought. Margaret wasn't alone because she failed at relationships. She was alone because she succeeded at being herself. And being herself meant seeing things clearly, including the fact that most human connection is built on agreed upon fictions. Little lies we tell each other to smooth the edges. The smartest people can't maintain those fictions. They've tried. They're exhausted from trying. And here's what nobody wants to admit: sometimes the loneliness is a choice. Not a happy choice. Not an easy choice, but a choice nonetheless. Because the alternative, spending your whole life translating yourself, dimming yourself, apologizing for seeing what you see, that's its own kind of death. Margaret chose her kind of loneliness over that kind of death. I think she was right. I'm 87 now, 2 years older than I was when Margaret died. I live alone in the same apartment, 4 doors down from where she used to live. I don't go to the widows group. I don't bite my tongue anymore. When my son Robert calls and says something I know to be wrong, I gently correct him. Sometimes he gets quiet. Sometimes he gets off the phone quickly. The holiday invitations are rare now. Linda worries about me. She thinks I'm becoming difficult in my old age. Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just becoming more like myself and less like the woman I thought I needed to be. I have 3 friends now. Real friends. People I can talk to about real things. We meet for coffee every Thursday at a place on Maple Street. We argue about politics and philosophy and whether the universe is infinite. Sometimes we sit in comfortable silence. Nobody performs. It's not the life I thought I'd have. It's smaller in some ways, quieter. But it's mine. Actually mine. Margaret left me her books in her will. All of them. 17 boxes. They're stacked in my living room now, and I'm reading through them one by one. Last week I finished a book about cosmology. This week I'm starting one about the history of language. Maybe one day I'll regret not trying harder to be the kind of person who fills a funeral home. But for now, I'd rather have 11 people at my funeral who actually knew me than 100 who knew the performance I gave for 43 years. Thank you for sitting with me, for listening to something most people don't want to hear, about loneliness and intelligence and the prices we pay for being seen. If you want to sit with me again, I'll be here, still reading Margaret's books, still learning what it means to be alone and awake at the same time. Take care of yourself, whatever that means for you.